Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. In this episode, we're going to be making a sheath for the chef's knife that I featured in the last video. Starting out with some veg tan leather. This is 7-ounce leather, and just drawing the profile of the knife on the leather itself, and then marking off the edges where the sheath will be and the welt will be. So I normally use about a 3/8 inch welt. And here I'm just drawing that out. I'll use a set of leather shears to cut out the first side of this leather. And then I'll take that piece and I'll put it and flip it and put it over on another piece of leather there and draw out the pattern from that piece of leather and then cut out the back piece. Once everything's cut out, then I kind of check to see if my lines match up and if it's both the same size. And here I have just a little bit of a discrepancy on the top there. So what I'll do is I'll just mark it off, and then I'll trim it up with an X-Acto knife. And at this point, what I'm going to do is I bevel the edges of the tops, because you can't really get to those once everything's glued up. So that's the first thing that I do. And I put tape on the backs, on the flesh side of the leather. What that does is it keeps the leather in place when you're doing tooling. If you're going to do any kind of tooling that involves pretty much the entire face of your leather, what it tends to do is stretch out that leather. So the tape on the back keeps the leather in place and tends to alleviate that issue of the leather stretching and you getting your pieces off when you go to put them together. So I'm marking out the bevel line, or the actual border lines with a stitching groover here. And that's going to actually be on the inside of that's where I'm going to be putting the tooling. So next step is to get the leather wet. So I'll dampen it, a dampened sponge here to wet the leather. I don't let it sit for very long, and I go with this dental tool here, and what I do is I run it over my borders. What that does is it cleans up some of that where you get some tear out from your stitching groover. It makes it nice and smooth. At this point, I'm going to put in my maker's mark stamp. This will be the back side of the sheath. Then we can move on to putting the tooling in. So the tooling I'm going to use here, this is basically just a texturing tool. And I'm just doing a random pattern going around. So it doesn't have to be anything symmetrical, it's just random. Very simple sheath here, nothing fancy as far as the tooling is concerned. So this is just a random textured pattern on both sides. Next part of the tooling here is using a camouflage tool to go around the borders. So what that does is it kind of, if I have any mishaps in my border, or if I go a little bit over the border with my texturing, the camouflage tool hides all of that. And plus it gives it a nice outline of your border, makes everything pop once you get the dye on. Okay, now that the tooling is finished, I've got the welt cut out. This is going to be two-sided, so I'm cut it out in two different pieces. And the other piece there is actually the retention strap that'll get put on to hold the knife in from, if it's turned upside down, it won't fall out of the sheath. Got to rough up one side where it's very smooth. The cement doesn't tend to stick very well to that slick surface, so you rough it up with that little roughing tool that I used there, and then you can put your cement on and let that dry for about 10 minutes so it's tacky to the touch, and then you can put your welts on. For those of you that don't know what a welt is, the welt is pieces of leather that go in between the front and the back side of that leather. And what it does is it protects the stitching from the knife edge if you put it in there crooked, or if you go down too far and the tip sticks through. It just protects that stitching, and also keeps your knife tip and your edge from coming through the two pieces of leather, the front and back pieces. So here I'm just kind of looking to make sure that I had my final fit up right, and right here you see that I have it dyed already. So what had happened was my camera died right in the middle of dying, so we lost that footage there. And here I'm putting in a snap where the retention strap's going to attach to. And I also, right after this, my memory card filled up, so I lost some footage here. So, but you'll get the gist of it. Snap is on, and the leather is now dyed. So what I'm going to do here now is I'm taking some antiquing, and this is black antiquing. What this does is it makes anything that has impressions in the leather pop out. I mean, they'll be highlighted in black. The purple will come out once I start wiping it down, as you see here. The reason I went with purple dye is because the chef's knife that I made, the handle has Purple Heart going down the center of it on that frame handle. So I thought it would be a nice contrast. Besides, I like purple. And if you notice, I don't go completely down to the bottom of the sheath with the dye and the antiquing, because it really isn't necessary. You're not going to see down that far when the sheath is all put together. So just doing final sanding on the edges here, making sure everything's trued up and I don't have any welts sticking out, and everything's nice and flush on the sides. So I go out to my 2x72, and I normally use around an 80 grit belt to finish the texture, or the cleanup of the edges. Drilling the holes for the stitching. This is where I put a stitching groove in there and then marked it out with a stitching wheel, about 5 stitches per inch. And then I take it to the drill press, keep it nice and flat, and then drill through. I find this works much better than punching through the leather. Some people really like to do that, but to me this is much easier. It looks just as nice once you're finished. Once we got our holes drilled, it's time to go back over the back side where the holes are with the stitching groover. Don't do this in the beginning, just for the fact that if you get your holes off center from when you're drilling them and they don't meet up with that stitch grooving line on the back side, it just looks horrible. So I do it after the fact. And once that's done, I'll go back through with my awl and poke through those holes just to push down any of that leather that's sitting up from dragging that groover across. Here we're doing a buck stitch, which this is a double needle setup, and you put one needle through a hole and you put the other needle through the opposite direction of the same hole, and then you pull it tight. Do this all the way down. This is actually one of my favorite processes in sheath making. It doesn't take that long. Once you get in the groove, it goes rather quickly. So I'll go down one side and then switch and do the other side. Once that's completely finished, I usually do a couple of back stitch just to get it real tight, put it in there, and then cut those off and melt them down with the lighter. Next step in this process is to burnish the edges. You want a nice slick edge, that nice shiny, good sheen on that edge. So I use a product called Tokenol. It seems to work the best for me that I've found so far. I've used gum, tragacanth, I've used water, I've used spit. This seems to work the best for me. Gives it a nice burnished edge. Final step in the process here is to put a nice heavy coat of Aussie wax over the entire sheath and get the heat gun and melt that right into the leather. It takes it really nice, absorbs right in, gives it a nice sheen, nice waxy finish, protects it. But that's it. Hey, I appreciate you watching the video today. If you got anything out of this video, please go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe. I'd appreciate it. Coming up in the next build, I see those two little EDC knives laying on the bench there. Those are going to be twist Damascus. We're going to go through that process and get those blades finished up. Again, if you want to watch that video, subscribe and hit the notification button, and you'll be notified when that video comes out. Appreciate it. Have a great day.